Sergeant, you want some of this new Cool Whip topping?
Later, Pyle. I'm getting in shape in case our Cool Whip contest winner's a girl. Anybody can win a trip to Hollywood and a guest appearance on the show.
For decades, fans believed Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., was as wholesome behind the scenes as it was on screen. But as the show enters a new wave of public attention, forgotten interviews, network decisions, and cast insights are shedding light on a far more complex production story, especially involving Frank Sutton, the man behind the unforgettable Sergeant Carter. Did Sutton ever struggle with the character he made famous? Was there creative tension with co-stars? And what legacy did he leave behind after his sudden death? Today, we reveal the untold, fact-based story, straight from Sutton's interviews, cast recollections, network archives, and modern fan reactions. To the millions of viewers who tuned in each week, Sergeant Vince Carter was a storm of shouts, salutes, and red-faced reprimands, a Marine drill instructor constantly outmaneuvered by the wide-eyed, well-meaning Gomer Pyle. But beneath that loud, commanding voice was Frank Sutton, a deeply disciplined actor with a story far more nuanced than the character he brought to life. While Sutton delivered each scene with expert timing and military precision, few fans realized how much effort and strain it took to embody such a forceful presence, and how deeply the experience shaped, and sometimes challenged, the man behind the uniform. Frank Sutton was not originally known for comedy. Before joining the cast of Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. in 1964, he had earned respect for his dramatic roles in both television and film. Among his most noted appearances was a role in the 1955 Academy Award-winning film Marty, in which he delivered a memorable supporting performance. A graduate of Columbia University, where he studied drama and graduated with honors, Sutton developed his craft through stage performances and serious character work. His approach to acting was rooted in theater, demanding discipline, control, and emotional depth. So when he was cast as Sergeant Carter, it represented a sharp shift in tone, moving from the world of dramatic storytelling to broad, often slapstick-inflected sitcom humor. But Sutton approached the part with the same commitment he brought to every performance. Though the character was brash and bombastic, Sutton crafted him with attention to rhythm, structure, and purpose. His portrayal required constant vocal projection, expressive facial work, and a highly physical presence. The performance looked effortless on screen, but behind the scenes, it demanded intense focus and stamina. Sutton's professionalism was widely recognized by his peers. Co-stars and crew members recalled his dedication to preparation, his reliability on set, and his commitment to delivering strong performances regardless of scene size or content. He rarely flubbed a line, showed up fully prepared, and treated the work of television acting with the same seriousness many reserved for film or stage. To him, a sitcom set still required the rigor of craft and collaboration. Personal experience adds to that rigor. Sutton had tried to join the U.S. Marine Corps in World War II but was turned down due to color blindness. Not to be deterred, he entered the service in the U.S. Army instead. Eventually, Sutton became a sergeant and saw active combat in the South Pacific, landing in beach assault landings. His genuine military experience lent realism to his portrayal of Sergeant Carter. He didn't just play the part of a soldier, he knew how soldiers walked, carried themselves, and commanded respect. This gave solid grounding to his character, even within the show's outlandishly slapstick framework. Yet the very strengths that contributed to Sutton's effectiveness came to plague him with personal and professional difficulties. As Gomer Pyle became more popular, Sutton began feeling more and more that the line between performer and performance was blurring in the eyes of the lay public. People would call to him in public, expecting him to act like an exaggerated version of Sergeant Carter, loud, aggressive, and gruff. While he appreciated the show's exposure and affection, the burden of always being, in character, grew quietly heavy. But as the seasons rolled on, and the show continued with its same formula, Carter shouting and Gomer smiling and some lessons learned, Sutton began running into those creative walls that come with success in television. Indeed, while audiences who care little for predictability lapped it all up, there really was little opportunity for dramatic evolution. Carter's role pretty much remained static during those rare moments when Neighbor's character enjoyed songs and some emotional development. This was a quiet but constant frustration for Sutton, the classical actor who loved variety and growth. From interviews and profiles in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Sutton was well aware that most of the time, such a role could easily become a trap. He knew how audiences could cling so tightly to one particular character as to obscure the remainder of a performer's career. Like many actors of the era, he had to juggle the lucrative safety net of fame and fortune that the show could guarantee with the confines it placed upon his broader artistic ambitions. There is no evidence that he ever publicly spoke out against the series, but colleagues did note an undercurrent of hope that eventually he would return to the theater and dramatic material. Even though he gave his all to the role, what fans didn't see was the growing contrast between Sutton's acting discipline and the increasingly musical, comedic shift of the show's lead. To viewers, the chemistry between Frank Sutton and Jim Nabors was central to the charm of Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. Sutton's sharp, high-strung Sergeant Carter clashing with Nabors' soft-spoken, wide-eyed Gomer created a timeless comic formula. Their scenes balanced exasperation and innocence with remarkable timing, contributing to the show's success across 5 seasons. But while their on-screen rapport was electric, their real-life relationship was more reserved, shaped less by friendship and more by professionalism. Sutton and Nabors came from different backgrounds and brought contrasting energies to the set. Sutton, a trained actor with a degree from Columbia University and a background in drama and theater, approached the role of Sergeant Carter with focus and precision. His acting style reflected discipline and rehearsal, shaped by years of classical preparation. Nabors, on the other hand, entered the entertainment world through variety shows and singing. Discovered by Andy Griffith while performing in a nightclub, Nabors was not a traditional actor but a natural entertainer, known for his gentle persona and musical talent. This did shape their working styles toward quite different ways of television success. Sutton came on stage completely prepared, deadly by the script, giving him a sense of structure and intention in the delivery of his lines. For Nabors, who practiced a more informal approach, relied heavily on instinct and charisma. This did not bring open differences between them. Instead, it invited quiet contrast in approach to performance and production. Theirs was a professional base, efficient, courteous about their roles, but not close in any personal sense. After Gomer Pyle finished airing in 1969, Jim Nabors invited Sutton to join him on the Jim Nabors Hour, a musical comedy variety show that ran from 1969 to 1971. Sutton became a semi-regular guest, reenacting some elements of his Carter character as part of some comedic sketches. The fact that Sutton worked alongside Nabors in this post-Pyle collaboration suggests a cordial disposition toward each other, mutual respect perhaps, even if they were not the best of friends away from the work. During the life of the series, Gomer Pyle began to draw more on Nabors' musical talents, occasionally incorporating singing performances to capitalize on his popularity as a variety performer. Nabors obtained a recording contract and released several albums during the sitcom's lifetime, allowing his career to grow beyond the confines of TV. Sutton, meanwhile, chose to pursue acting and the like over forays into music or TV variety show appearances. It is this natural divergence in opportunities that attests to their careers evolving along different paths rather than suggesting some kind of rivalry or resentment. The caricaturization of Sergeant Carter by Sutton was pure of intent. Most of the show's humor lay in the disparity between what Gomer made of circumstances and what the annoyed Sergeant Carter perceived them to be. While Nabors was allowed moments of character growth and even self-exploration, including his singing, Sutton was purely the frustrated authority figure. Nevertheless, Sutton never uttered a single word in public that sounded even a little bit frustrated about the show or his role in it. Instead, even within interviews during the run of the show, he has always bent in acknowledgement of both the popularity of the show and the gratitude he expressed for being a part thereof. They have generally been described by the surviving crew and cast on the set as disciplined, professional, and working atmosphere. No incident was reported or confirmed of friction or quarrel or caused by them in production delays at work with Sutton or Nabors. Kobe Ruskin, director for many of the episodes, refrained from placing himself on record concerning personal clashes of the leads. Accessed interviews and retrospectives, MeTV, and fan sites have consistently remarked on the duo's consistency and their ability to maintain professionalism throughout the production schedule. Despite any quiet frustration, Sutton never publicly criticized the show. But decades later, fan outrage over a modern rerun decision brought Sutton's legacy back into the spotlight. When the cameras stopped rolling, for 5 seasons, Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. dominated the television landscape. It consistently ranked in the top 10 Nielsen ratings, riding on the back of its charming premise and the magnetic push-pull between Gomer and Sergeant Carter. But while the laugh track painted a picture of harmony, those final seasons told a more complicated story, one that unfolded only when the red light on the camera switched off. By 1968, both Frank Sutton and Jim Nabors were showing signs of fatigue, not just physically from the grueling shooting schedule, but emotionally. For Sutton, the strain had started to seep into his performance. He wasn't phoning it in, but the spark that once defined Sergeant Carter had started to feel mechanical. According to a 1969 interview with writer Everett Greenbaum, Sutton had begun to feel boxed in. He said, "Frank was a gifted actor with range. He could do drama, Shakespeare, anything. But by the final season, he was just yelling a lot. And he hated that. Behind the scenes, cast and crew had begun to notice subtle cracks in morale. Neighbors, who had already begun his music career and was increasingly in demand for variety specials and live performances, was growing restless too. He wanted out, not out of friendship, but out of repetition. According to director Kobe Ruskin, Jim was getting tired of playing Gomer. He didn't want to be 40 and still playing a wide-eyed recruit. That sentiment eventually led to his decision to walk away from the show at its peak. But it wasn't just the leads feeling the tension. Supporting cast members, including Ronnie Schell, Duke Slater, had reportedly noticed a shift in tone on set. Where once the mood had been light and collaborative, it had grown quieter, more transactional. Part of that came from sheer overexposure. 5 years of rigid sitcom structure, studio notes, and relentless tapings had taken their toll. People began treating it more like a job and less like a family. Frank Sutton, despite his deep professionalism, reportedly began clashing more frequently with writers and producers. He wanted Sergeant Carter to evolve, perhaps to show more vulnerability or explore life outside the Marine base. The network wasn't interested. CBS executives knew the formula worked: Carter yells, Gomer smiles, and laughter ensues. They weren't going to mess with success. But Sutton had higher aspirations. He longed to stretch himself, to take roles that didn't require a military uniform and a perpetual scowl. And then came the final season, a season marked by shorter arcs, more predictable storylines, and a noticeable lack of spark. Though still pulling solid ratings, Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. was showing its age. Jim Nabors made the final call in 1969, telling producers he would not return for a 6th season. "I wanted to do something different," he told the Los Angeles Times that year. "I didn't want to wear a private's uniform forever." As renewed interest grew, long-lost interviews and letters resurfaced, revealing just how Sutton really felt about the role that made him famous. Frank Sutton was known to millions as the hot-headed, quick-tempered Sergeant Carter. But those who worked with him behind the scenes saw a man who was far more thoughtful, and sometimes quietly frustrated. Despite the military persona he embodied on screen, Sutton was a trained stage actor, a graduate of Columbia University, and a veteran himself. He wasn't just performing discipline, he understood it. And that's why some of the behind-the-scenes creative decisions on Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. slowly began to wear him down. Sutton never openly complained while the show was running, but years later, colleagues would admit that he often felt stuck. He appreciated the success, the fan mail, and the security. But he also feared being forever typecast. In one archived 1970s interview with TV Guide, Sutton admitted, "I'm proud of the show. I just wish there was room for Carter to grow." The problem, however, was that television executives weren't interested in evolution. They were interested in ratings. And Carter's character remained trapped in the same loop, yelling, reacting, fuming, and occasionally softening, but never really changing. Multiple sources in Sutton's circle recalled that sometimes Sutton would come in early to discuss alternate takes or suggest subtleties to Carter's responses to Gomer. He wanted more realism, more humanity. But these ideas were waved away. The producers didn't want nuance, they wanted punchlines. Eventually, that became creative tension. Not so much dramatic fights or shouting matches, just quiet withdrawal. Sutton began withdrawing between takes, spending time in his dressing room while the script was being rewritten without his input. The mounting pressure came from the growing public perception that Sutton was Sergeant Carter. In public places, fans would stop him to shout, "Move it, Pyle," or to bark Marine slogans. While that had once been somewhat fun, there came a point when it turned into a burden. He was not ashamed of the character, he was proud of it, but he was ashamed to be reduced to it. And unlike Jim Nabors, who took the opportunity to go into singing and variety shows, Sutton didn't have many options. After Gomer Pyle, casting directors found it hard to see him as anything but the red-faced drill sergeant, and the roles that were offered to him mostly reflected that one note. Another eyewitness of the toll was John Rich, director and friend, who later recalled, "Frank had so much range, but they just kept handing him these scripts where he'd have to shout and sweat. He was looking for something quieter, something heavy." That want proved to be ever deeper with the passing of the years, especially as Nabors moved on to the Jim Nabors Hour and other pursuits. Sutton was a guest occasionally, and the two got along, yet the disparity between their chances in post-show life went unremarked by both. The difference was that Frank Sutton would rather take his grievances underground. He never condemned the show or undermined Nabors, nor did he sell stories to the tabloids. His professionalism remained intact even while he silently stayed at war against the restrictions imposed on him by the very character that gave him fame. "Dad was a trooper, I guess he just hated being stuck. After a while, he had more say than he was given credit for." So said his son, Joe Sutton. Tragically, Sutton never got to redefine himself. But the sudden way his life ended brought new attention to what he left behind. For years, Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., held a reliable spot in the MeTV lineup, a nightly comfort for fans of classic television. The show wasn't just nostalgia, it was ritual. Families tuned in for the antics of Gomer and the bluster of Sergeant Carter, often discovering the series for the first time or revisiting it decades after its original run. But in late May 2025, something unexpected happened. MeTV quietly announced that Gomer Pyle would be dropped from its summer primetime rotation. What followed was an eruption of disappointment, confusion, and outright backlash. The decision was part of the network's broader Summer of Me programming shuffle, an annual effort to freshen up its lineup and test new audience engagement strategies. This time, however, it touched a nerve. Fans took to Reddit, Facebook, and classic TV forums to express their outrage. MASH could be dropped an hour and replace it with Dan August, take off Gomer Pyle in a slot, wrote one Redditor. Another added simply, I will miss Gomer Pyle, echoing what many others felt but didn't know how to articulate. Some longtime viewers accused MeTV of showing favoritism, keeping shows like The Honeymooners and MA*S*H* on air while giving Gomer Pyle the boot. Others suspected the network underestimated just how strong the Gomer Pyle fanbase still was. They think we're only here for Hawkeye and Ralph Cramden, one fan wrote. They've forgotten the heart and humor Gomer brought into our homes. The decision also sparked debates about what constitutes a classic in today's shifting media landscape, and whether TV history is being selectively preserved or slowly rewritten. But what added fuel to the fire wasn't just the schedule change. It was the network's silence. MeTV issued no detailed public explanation. No press release highlighted why Gomer Pyle was removed, or whether it would return. For fans who had stuck with the channel precisely because of its consistency and respect for legacy content, that silence felt like betrayal. Many interpreted the change as more than just a programming tweak, it was a statement about what the network valued and what it didn't. Then came the unexpected twist. In June 2025, Catchy Comedy, a sister network of the Weigel Broadcasting family, was broadcasting a Gomer Pyle marathon for 24-hour programming. For 24 hours, viewers across the world had to see every yell, every salute, and every wide-eyed Gomer moment imaginable. Quite binge-worthy, it was rather a subtle punchback. It was a reminder that Frank Sutton's contemporary and counterpart, Sergeant Carter, had a place in the sun, and there was still hunger for the unique humor and warmth Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. brought to television. The marathon had immediate success. Social media was abuzz with screenshots, quotes, and fan stories. Viewership on Catchy Comedy skyrocketed. It raised the question, if Catchy Comedy can air Gomer Pyle and give it a big ol' salute, what the heck is MeTV doing? Why was a series that had 5 seasons and was always in the Nielsen Top 10 getting shunted to off-Saturdays and one-day commemorative shows? Even now, Sutton's story isn't complete without hearing from those who worked beside him, and decades later, they've begun to speak. To the average viewer, Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C. looked like the perfect blend of military comedy and heartwarming friendship. The on-screen chemistry between Jim Nabors' wide-eyed, lovable Gomer and Frank Sutton's fiery, frustrated Sergeant Carter created magic that powered the show through 5 successful seasons. But like many beloved sitcoms, the atmosphere behind the scenes wasn't always as picture-perfect as the episodes themselves. Frank Sutton, by all accounts, was nothing like his hot-headed character. Friends, cast members, and even Nabors himself described Sutton as thoughtful, intense, and highly professional. A trained stage actor with deep roots in dramatic theater, Sutton brought discipline and precision to his work, sometimes clashing with the looser, more improvisational tone Nabors liked to explore. According to multiple accounts, the biggest creative tension stemmed from differing styles. Jim Nabors, whose background was in variety and music, thrived on instinct and spontaneity. Frank Sutton, in contrast, memorized every line, hit every mark, and expected the same from those around him. This divide didn't manifest in open hostility, but it did cause moments of friction, especially when shooting long, emotionally charged scenes. A 1984 interview with director Kobe Ruskin, who worked on dozens of episodes, revealed some of those behind-the-scenes moments. Frank was a perfectionist. If someone flubbed a line, even in rehearsal, he'd stop and reset. Jim Nabors was more relaxed. That sometimes created a push-pull dynamic. But here's the thing, it worked. That tension made the show better. Despite any creative differences, there was no personal feud. In fact, Nabors and Sutton developed a quiet respect for one another. Sutton once told a friend in the early 1970s, Jim makes people laugh by being himself. I yell at him for a living, and it works. But it only works because I trust him to be the straight man when I need it. This professional bond helped the show strike a balance few sitcoms ever achieved, genuine heart wrapped inside comedy. Other cast members, like Ronnie Shell, who played Duke Slater, often spoke about the unusual rhythm on set. We'd have these really funny moments on screen, and then between takes, Frank would go quiet, always reviewing the next scene in his head, Shell recalled in a 2011 reunion panel. He wasn't standoffish. He just didn't do small talk. He took his job seriously. Some crew members remembered occasional disagreements, not heated fights, but subtle moments when Sutton would suggest retakes or question a comedic beat. One assistant director anonymously shared with a fan blog in 2017, Frank would pull the director aside after a scene and say, "That gag landed flat. Let's redo it." He was almost always right. Jim Nabors, ever the gentleman, never publicly criticized anyone from the show. When asked about Frank Sutton during a 2002 retrospective on The Carol Burnett Show, he smiled and said, "Frank was a real Marine, even if he wasn't one. He cared about the work more than the spotlight. That's rare." And Sutton did care, deeply. He often stayed late, worked on script changes, and even ran lines with guest actors to help them feel comfortable. Yet this same dedication sometimes isolated him from a cast that was looser and more laid back. It was a quiet divide, never personal, always professional. There were even rumors in the show's later seasons that Sutton grew frustrated with the creative direction. As Gomer Pyle moved increasingly into slapstick and farce, Sutton reportedly pushed for deeper character moments. "Let's show why Carter cares, not just that he yells," he allegedly told a producer during season 4. Those requests were rarely honored. The show leaned into its comedic formula, and Sutton, ever the pro, followed suit, even if it meant holding back parts of his dramatic skill set. This quiet sacrifice is part of why Sutton's performance still resonates. He gave everything to a role that often gave little back. There were no Emmy wins, no major awards, no top billing. But there was enduring respect. Decades later, fans still cite his portrayal as the emotional backbone of the show. In a television era now dominated by drama and scandal, Sutton's dignity stands out. But how do we honor a star who never asked for recognition? Legacy and the fight to remember. Frank Sutton's portrayal of Sergeant Vince Carter didn't just elevate Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., it became one of television's most iconic performances. Yet, for years after his sudden death in 1974, his contribution was often overshadowed by larger TV legends. While Jim Nabors continued to find success in variety shows and stage performances, Sutton's legacy was quieter, more complex, and in danger of being forgotten. Until now. For decades, Gomer Pyle reruns kept the spirit of Sergeant Carter alive on networks like TV Land and MeTV. Audiences, old and new, fell in love with Sutton's unmatched delivery, comic timing, and emotional depth. But in May and June 2025, a surprising decision from MeTV reignited a conversation many fans weren't ready to have. Gomer Pyle was pulled from its prime schedule. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Classic television communities across Facebook and Reddit erupted in frustration. "This is a disgrace," one fan wrote. "Frank Sutton carried that show. He made it what it was. You don't just erase that." Others pointed fingers at the network, accusing them of sidelining a beloved classic in favor of more mainstream reruns like MASH and The Honeymooners. Comments like "I will miss Gomer Pyle," or "Why can't they trim down MASH and make room," flooded MeTV's social media pages. While the network explained the change was part of its Summer of Me refresh, many fans felt it reflected a broader problem. Classic performers like Sutton weren't getting the lasting recognition they deserved. But in an unexpected turn, the controversy sparked something hopeful. Just weeks later, the digital network Catchy Comedy aired a 24-hour Gomer Pyle marathon, dubbed a binge celebration of the show's enduring charm. This event drew in both longtime fans and a younger generation discovering the magic for the first time. Suddenly, Sutton's name was trending again, not for scandal, but for substance. The success of the marathon reminded viewers and programmers alike that Sutton's legacy still mattered. And not just because of nostalgia. His role as Sergeant Carter was more than comedic yelling, it was layered, emotionally grounded, and anchored in real-life service. Sutton had served in the U.S. Army during World War II. His performance wasn't just acting, it was personal. Family members and biographers have long stated that Sutton never resented being typecast. He embraced Sergeant Carter, even as he took on more serious roles in theater and guest spots on dramas. His dedication to craft was legendary. Despite being known for a comedic character, Sutton saw acting as a calling, not a spotlight. After his death, tributes poured in from co-stars, directors, and fans. Yet over time, his name became less mentioned in major retrospectives. Unlike other TV legends, he didn't write a memoir or live long enough to be part of reunion specials. His story was incomplete, until now. The renewed interest in Gomer Pyle in 2025 created something of a Frank Sutton revival. Classic TV podcasts began dedicating full episodes to his performance. YouTube fan retrospectives featuring behind-the-scenes photos and rare interviews gained traction. Sutton's son, Joe Sutton, a successful playwright, acknowledged in a 2021 interview that his father would be humbled by how long people have remembered him. This resurgence raises bigger questions. How do we honor television pioneers who didn't get a second act? How many more Frank Suttons are out there, legends whose impact is quietly fading beneath the weight of time and shifting media priorities? In a media world increasingly dominated by streaming giants and modern content, the fight to preserve golden-era television history is growing more urgent. And Sutton's story sits at the heart of it. His was a legacy built not on viral fame or big-budget roles, but on consistency, humility, and unforgettable talent. It's fitting, then, that Sutton's final contribution was to a show rooted in kindness and heart. Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., may have started as a spin-off of The Andy Griffith Show, but Sutton helped turn it into something uniquely powerful. If this video brought you something new about Sutton's story, leave a comment below and tell us your favorite Sergeant Carter moment. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check out the next video for more stories behind the legends of classic television.